I'm really excited to announce version 2.4.0 of PolyNome. This has been a long time coming and it adds some great new features. In this video, I want to quickly show you some of the new features in this version of PolyNome. For starters, it's now much simpler to edit the pattern in PolyNome. Simply tap on the metronome and choose Edit Pattern, and in here you can edit both the rhythm, the sounds, and the accents. To edit the rhythm, select notes and delete them, and you can add from the palette in the bottom of the screen. You have whole note, half note, quarter note, eighth note, 16th note, and then dotted half, dotted quarter, and dotted eighth, and all divisions of those up to 32. You can also edit note groups, so you can tap, choose Edit, and remove some of the notes. PolyNome will display the consolidated version on the screen. You can also quickly add accents in this page, and you can jump between note groups to edit them. If you tap and hold a button in the palette, it will enter the note group and bring up the edit window. In here, you also have some fun options to interpret as quintuplets or septuplets. When adding accents, you can also now add ties and slashes to notes, as well as flams, drags, and roughs. You can use these arrows to move between notes. To add sounds to notes, tap below them and use one of the 8 sound buttons to enter notes. You have 3 different L sounds, 3 different R sounds, K and H. As before, you can tap on these buttons to bring up the new sound picker. The buttons are in the bottom and you assign sounds here. You can swipe through categories and you can search for the sounds that you want. When you're adding sounds, you can now change those sounds from the sounds picker here, and only the entered sounds will appear down here. Let's make them both snare. And let's hear how this sounds. I've also added a keyboard to PolyNome. Select the sounds line, tap on sound buttons and choose keyboard. There's a 6-octave keyboard. There's a scale picker. And there's an audition mode for people who aren't familiar with the notes. In audition mode, you can find the note that you want and then add it to the rhythm. You can choose between keyboard sounds and bass sounds. There's also conical entry. Here you can add conical voice syllables. And you can create and enter your own chains. You can swipe on the sounds to see what is entered and hear it. Back on the main screen, when you have notes and sounds and conical entered, you'll see new options. With conical, you can choose between voice samples and percussion samples. With the melodies, you can transpose sounds and you can swap between bass and keys. You can also displace and shuffle sounds, accents, and rhythms. And random muting is now much easier to access. You can choose to mute notes, note groups, bars, or cycles, and select the probability of how often to mute. In the presets, when you're deleting a preset, you'll now be given the option to keep the practice events. They will be added against a trash preset. That means that your cumulative practice time won't go down when you delete presets that you're no longer using. The introduction playlist now has new videos explaining how playlists work. If you create a new playlist, when you add presets to it, it will tell you if that preset exists somewhere else, and you can choose to use a copy of that or create a standalone version. Standalone versions in playlists won't ask you if you want to save versions in other playlists. You can change the name of an item in a playlist by tapping the gear icon and clicking on Rename. Under Relations, you can choose whether the item is linked to other items in playlists or if it's standalone. If you choose Linked, you can view copies. These are other presets with the same name in different playlists. There's a new option to add a section header to a playlist. In presets, it's very easy to add labels to multiple items. And then you can filter on those labels. You can filter on multiple labels, and PolyNome will narrow down the selection to show only items that contain all of those labels. Finally, there are some options in Preferences for autosave, and you can choose to have PolyNome always save copies in the preset library, copies in the same playlist, and copies in other playlists, or to never save those. You will see a pop-up directing you to this page after you've been asked if you want to save copies in those places. So that's a quick overview of the new features in PolyNome 2.4.0. I really hope you'll enjoy these and get as much use out of them as I have. I'd love to see videos of what you're doing with PolyNome. If you post them to Instagram, tag with @PolyNomeApp.